G'day! G'day, g'day, g'day everybody. How are we all doing today? I'm very well, thank you for asking. Very kind of you. Today, I have something a little different. Yeah! So, as some of you might know, I love history. Everyone knows that. I speak about it all the time. I specialised in Nazi Germany, and it is my favourite period of history to look at because I just find it so ruddy fascinating, so I do. I find it wonderful to read about, because just how can stuff like that happen? That's why I like to read, to try and understand and try to make sure it does not happen again. Anyway, I've also mentioned quite a few times that I really like reading, because I do. It's one of my favourite hobbies, other than watching YouTube and TV and stuff. I also am a very keen reader, and as a result, history, Nazi Germany, reading, smush in one. I read a lot about Nazi Germany, a lot. Fiction, non-fiction, somewhere in between the two. So today I thought I would do a video about my top 10 favourite books about Nazi Germany. Most of them are fiction. Some of them are based on true stories, so I never know whether that's fiction or non-fiction because they're based, so some of them have been adapted so that they're more suitable for a story kind of atmosphere. So there will be spoilers, I'm sorry. So if I say a book at the beginning of whatever number I've said and you don't want to know about that book, skip to the next bit, okay? I'm not going to ruin the book, but I am going to talk about it, so be careful. So let's just crack right on, shall we? So top 10. Number 10, we have got Living with the Enemy by Freddie Noller. Now this book has quite an interesting story behind it because I met the author while I was at sixth form, which is college to most people, not to Americans because college means university in America. Why are you all so confusing? So when I was in college, which is aged 16 to 18, we had a guest speaker in to do an assembly. So we all sat in the big hall and had a man on stage, and his name was Freddie Noller. And he was a survivor of the Holocaust. He had been running away from the Nazis his whole life from kind of the age of 14, I think. And he ended up in Paris, and he in the end ended up escorting Nazis round the red light district in Paris, the Moulin Rouge, setting them up with ladies of the night, and all the time they did not know that he was Jewish. So he then gets found out in Paris because he has a girlfriend who tells on him. He's still not 100% sure of that to this day. It could have been anything, but he thinks that it was a girlfriend who he fell out with, reported him to the authorities that he was in fact a Jewish man, and in the end he ends up in Auschwitz and obviously lives in the concentration camp, in the death camp, for a few months, a few years, I'm not really sure, I can't really remember, but he's there for a little while and eventually gets out, and it's just the whole story of him. So he's originally from Austria, and it's just a fantastic book. Obviously this is non-fiction because it's based on a true story. It's written by the man himself, so it's just amazing. Please read it, it's so good. And Freddie Noller himself was an inspiration. To stand next to a Holocaust survivor is just insane. I'm just so lucky that I've managed to meet such an inspirational person. Number 9, The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas by John Boyne. Obviously a really, really famous book now, and because it got turned into a really big film that a lot of people have seen, I really enjoyed the book, I really enjoyed the film. I can't find my copy, I don't know where it's gone. I don't know. But that is a story of a boy who is the son of a Nazi general who is in charge of a concentration camp, and becomes fast friends through the barbed wire fence with a young Jewish boy, and they have a fantastic friendship, and they don't see the differences between race. There is no xenophobia, there is no racism between their friendship, and it ends in tragedy. And I'm sure most of you know the ending, but it's awful. Number 8, Schindler's List by Thomas Kennedy. Such a famous book, such a famous film, obviously about helping people to escape, Jewish people to escape various situations with the Nazis trying to capture them and take them to Auschwitz. It's just an unforgettable story, it really is. It's so infamous now and it's known all around the world. It just needed to have a place on this list. Obviously some Some books I'm going to say are going to be lesser known, and some of them are just going to be classics, such as Schindler's List. So if you haven't read it, you must. It's just unforgettable. Number 7. Black Roses by Jane Thine. Now this is a series. I think there are now 5 books in this series, and they're all about the same woman called Clara Vine. And Clara Vine is the daughter of a British aristocrat and ends up in Nazi Germany, 1933 it starts. And her mother was German, so she is half German and speaks fluent German, and it turns out she ends up working in the UFA studios, which were the Nazi film studios, and she becomes friends with Magda Goebbels and has frequent contact with Joseph Goebbels and Hitler. It's all fiction, of course, it's completely not real. And in the later books, she ends up becoming a spy for England against Nazi Germany, which is obviously super dangerous. And it's just really interesting because there aren't really that many kind of famous women within Nazi Germany fiction, if that makes sense, because obviously it was such a masculine dominated regime. There were women. I can talk a lot about that because that's what I did my dissertation on. I might do that in a separate video if people are interested in knowing about famous women within the Third Reich, but there aren't really that many literary heroes. Most things we're going to look at here are kind of based on men, so it's really cool to see a spy within Nazi Germany who is female and is an actress and is kind of glamorous. It's just a really good book if you like a good kind of fiction, and there's a love story in there as well, which is always fun, you know. So I give that a good recommendation. Number 6, quite a new book, The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris, originally based on the powerful true story of Leil Sokolov. So this is about a Slovakian Jew who ends up in Auschwitz. He actually volunteers to go, not knowing that Auschwitz is what it is, and he thinks it will save his family if he goes, and unfortunately it doesn't. But he ends up in Auschwitz and survives, and it's just a story so thoroughly day to day of what happened in Auschwitz, and I found it fascinating to read. And he also found love in a death camp. It's just insane to think that something so positive and so human can grow out of such a horrific place. So I read this actually while I was in Poland with my friend Kasia, and obviously reading it and then going to Auschwitz the next day, it's just so poignant, because you can just imagine, he's talking about the various blocks and then you're standing outside that block. He was there, this guy was actually there 60 years ago, whatever, however long. It's just wow. So do give this one a read if you're interested in kind of what happened day to day in Auschwitz. Obviously we know the main thing that happened in Auschwitz and Auschwitz-Birkenau, but this is just a story of how prisoners were treated, and obviously he was a tattooist, and what kind of what kind of not as crap treatment you could get if you were skilled in something, such as Leil was. Number 5, a complete classic, of course, Diary of Anne Frank. Everybody knows about this book in the entire world, I'm sure. It's just so famous, so interesting to read from a 9-year-old girl. I think she was 9, obviously very young, and was actually a German, and a lot of people think because she was found in Amsterdam and lived in Amsterdam she was Dutch, but she wasn't. The Frank family were Germans who had moved to Holland, and obviously they were Jews, and it's just amazing to see a different side of the Holocaust, because you always think of them in the concentration camps. You don't really think about the life beforehand or during. And this is obviously them hiding. Imagine hiding in a place for years with no sunlight, no fresh air. It's just so poignant. And the way it just stops, because it's a diary, it's not a story, is it? It's not fiction. So it's not, and then we were dragged to the gas chambers. It's not like that. It's just, it just stops. Because obviously she didn't know the next day, the next night, that the Nazis were going to storm into their house, into their annex, into the attic, and just take them away. It made me very emotional reading it the first time a few years ago, and I think I read it in Amsterdam as well. I seem to have a habit of doing that, of reading books where they're based. I think because it makes me feel like I have a bigger connection with the history because I'm actually there. So when I was visiting the Anne Frank house, I had just read Anne Frank's book, so I could feel everything she was writing about a little bit more. It's just so innocent and so historically important. Children were taken, children were murdered. Read it if you haven't. Number 4. Now this is quite, I don't want to say cool because that's not a word you want to kind of talk about when describing the Nazis, but Maus by Art Spiegelman. It is a story of his dad who ended up in Auschwitz and various other concentration camps. But it's told through cartoons, which is something I've never seen before. And all the human beings in Auschwitz and the Jews are portrayed as mice, and the Nazis are portrayed as cats. You wouldn't believe how much joy I got from reading this book because it's told in such a different way. And it's so sad at the end. It's an amazing cartoon book. I've never read anything like this because I'm not really into kind of anime and manga and stuff like that, so when I first bought it I was quite surprised. It's just such a different way of telling a story, and it's really interesting to read and really interesting to look at the pictures, and the art itself is beautiful. Art Spiegelman is just a fantastic cartoonist, and it's just effective for kind of getting across the message without using words as such. You can express so much emotion in drawings and in pictures, and I really think that this book does that. So give it a look if you think that sounds interesting. We're down to the top 3. Da, 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 da. Another classic, Fatherland by Robert Harris. Such a good book. I only read this for the first time about 6 months ago, and it's made it to number 3 because it's just that good a book. It's about Nazis if they'd won the Second World War, so in April 1964, and it kind of gives you a whole different perspective of what the world would be like. And also there's a massive kind of thriller in it where a policeman who is part of the Nazi force, because you have to be if you want to work in such things, but isn't really a Nazi supporter, finds the body of a dead man in a lake, and it all comes back to a massive conspiracy that's been going on. The general public aren't aware that the Holocaust has happened. It had always been kept secret, but these people have found out, the policeman and his friends and his helpers kind of thing, and it's just all about trying to catch the right people and get it across to the free world to let the people know what is going on within Nazi Germany in 1964. It's such a good book. It's so thrilling. I honestly couldn't put it down. I read it within, I think, 2 days, and it's 400 pages long. And it's just really nicely written as well. Like, I like the text, and I like the kind of Germanic beginnings of words and stuff. Yeah, I really like this book. Give it a read. It's a good fiction book. Very good. Number 2. Now, I really could not decide between number 1 and number 2, so I do think they're pretty equal, because number 1 I just had to put as number 1 because I've always said it's my favourite book, so it kind of has to be number 1. But this is very close. Two Brothers by Ben Elton. Ben Elton is a very famous English writer. He has written a lot of things, and this book here is about 2 Jewish parents and their 2 sons, one of whom is adopted, and obviously being a Jew in Nazi Germany is the worst thing to be, so they find out that the adopted son is not Jewish, so obviously he's safe and the other Jewish son isn't. But they're twins. Even though they aren't biologically twins, they are twins. They've been raised since the day they were born together, and it's just a book about all their struggles really, and what happens between the 2 of them, the 2 brothers, and how eventually when World War II does start and the Nazis do come into power, how that affects their family and the awful things that happen to their parents. I don't want to give too much away. I've already given away a lot. Here is the blurb on the back. Berlin, 1920. 2 babies are born, 2 brothers, united and undivisible, sharing everything, twins in all but blood. As Germany marches towards its Nazi Armageddon, the ties of family, friendship and love are tested to the very limits of endurance, and the brothers are faced with an unimaginable choice. Which one of them will survive? I love it. This is one of my favourite books ever in the whole world, so if you haven't read this one, it is so good. Please read it. And then number 1, if anybody knows me or knows this channel very well, I've mentioned this book quite a few times, and you're going to see it's quite battered because I've read it so many times, but The Book Thief by Markus Zusak, told through the eyes of Death. Death is the narrator of the book, and just such an interesting take. This is fiction. It's about a little girl whose mum was a communist, so she gets taken away from the mum. We never see or hear from the mum again, and she gets placed with 2 foster parents who are a little bit older than normal parents, nearly grandparents' age, and she is so happy with them. She lives on a place called Schindlers and makes friends with a boy down the road called Rudy, and it's just about a young girl's experience through Nazi Germany. And then a Jewish man shows up and they try and help him, which is obviously a very, very bad punishable offence within Nazi Germany at the time. So it's just all ensuing from there, really. Everything that goes on is just fascinating to see, because it is what happened to various people who did try and help Jewish people, and what happened to the Jews as well. And it's told through the eyes of a young girl. It's good to have strong literary women, and I think Liesl Memminger, who is the main character, is one of those girls, and it inspired me to start reading more Nazi fiction, and here we are now with my top 10, and I could have gone on. I have so many more, but they are my top 10 Nazi fiction / non-fiction books. I really hoped you enjoyed it. If you have read any of them, please do leave me a comment below, because I would love to talk about them more with you guys. It's such a fascinating topic to read about and to study. Please let me know if you did enjoy this video, and I might make more. I might do a book review of a book I'm reading at the time. If not, that's fine. I won't do any more of these ever again. But I've enjoyed chatting about my favourite books. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you have any other recommendations of Nazi fiction, because I would love to hear them and I would love to read them. Check out my Patreon as usual, please. Check out my Instagram, and all the links for those are in the description below. Thank you so much. I shall see you very soon for another video. Tschüss, bye.